Riley, Brooke, and Addison Harper were the heart of their quiet Colorado town. Three inseparable sisters with bright futures ahead. But when all three were found dead in their home and their father, Daniel Harper, vanished without a trace, the town's heartbreak turned into horror. As investigators uncovered chilling clues and a web of secrets unraveled, one question haunted everyone. Was Daniel a grieving father pushed too far, or a calculating killer who had planned the unthinkable? From the outside, the Harper family looked like something out of a storybook. Their home, a two-story colonial-style house with green shutters and a neatly trimmed lawn, sat on the edge of Hawthorne Lane, where neighbours waved to each other from porches and children rode bikes until dusk. Daniel Harper, a local contractor, was often seen tinkering with home projects or playing catch in the yard with his daughters. After his wife, Leanne, died of cancer 2 years earlier, many in the II community viewed Daniel as a devoted single father, quietly doing his best in the face of tragedy. But behind the cheerful facade, something far more unsettling was unfolding. The three Harper sisters, Riley, Brooke, and Addison, were known around town for their close bond. Riley, the eldest at 17, was quiet but kind, always helping out at the library or babysitting for neighbours. Brooke, 14, was more outspoken and athletic, often seen at the soccer fields or walking their dog, Pepper. Addison, just 9, had a bubbly personality and a love for painting, her artwork often taped to the family's front windows. To outsiders, their lives seemed normal, even happy. But subtle changes began to appear over the past year, changes that were easy to overlook until it was too late. Teachers noticed Riley withdrawing from group activities. Once an honor student, she stopped applying for scholarships and missed deadlines for college applications. Brooke, usually full of energy, became moody and distant. She skipped soccer practice and was frequently late to school. Addison began, showing signs of anxiety, biting her nails until they bled and flinching when others came too close. These small red flags were chalked up to grief from losing their mother or the awkwardness of adolescence. Few connected the dots. After Leanne's death, Daniel became more private. He started turning down invitations from neighbours and stopped attending church. He took on fewer construction jobs, spending more time at home, often behind closed doors. No one knew exactly what went on inside that house, but the growing silence around it began to feel heavy. Several reports were made to social services, mostly from concerned teachers. There were claims of emotional neglect and whispers that the girls were not allowed to have friends over. A caseworker was assigned and made one visit, but Daniel was polite, cooperative, and the house was clean. No action was taken. Still, something didn't sit right with those closest to the family. A neighbour recalled hearing crying late at night, but assumed it was just grief. Another mentioned seeing Riley walking down the street alone in the cold, late at night, without a jacket. And yet, each concern seemed too minor on its own to raise alarm. No one imagined these would be the final months of the girls' lives. It would take a horrific discovery to reveal what had been hidden behind the walls of that house. And by the time the truth began to emerge, it was already too late to save them. When police arrived at the Harper residence that frigid January morning, the scene they walked into was both eerie and deeply unsettling. The house was quiet, unnaturally so. The front door was locked, the lights inside still glowing faintly, as if the day had never begun. It was a neighbour who first made the call. She had noticed the girls hadn't left for school, and the family's dog, usually outside barking by. Sunrise was nowhere to be seen. After knocking and receiving no response, she grew uneasy and called the authorities. What officers discovered inside would shake the small town of Maple Ridge to its core. Each of the three sisters was found in a separate bedroom. Riley, the eldest, was lying on her bed, a blanket pulled neatly to her chin. There were no signs of struggle. Brooke was in her room as well, headphones still resting on her chest, as though she had been listening to music before she died. Addison, the youngest, was found tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed animal by her side. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like they were all sleeping, but the silence was too heavy, too final. There was no blood, no broken glass, no overturned furniture, nothing to suggest a break-in or violent encounter. Everything was disturbingly clean and calm, but the medical examiner's initial assessment revealed that each girl had been poisoned. The method was deliberate and cold, designed to end their lives quietly and without struggle. Whoever had done this knew the girls' routines intimately. It was someone they trusted. Attention quickly turned to the only person missing from the house, their father, Daniel Harper. His pickup truck was gone, his phone disconnected, and his wallet missing. A search of the property revealed nothing to indicate where he might have gone. But it was what was found on the kitchen table that made investigators' blood run cold. A handwritten note, penned in Daniel's distinctive script, read, "They're safe now. I'm sorry." There was no signature, no explanation, just those haunting words. The note offered a glimpse into his mind, a mind perhaps unraveling, or perhaps convinced he had done something merciful. Investigators immediately issued a bulletin naming Daniel Harper a person of interest, but as the search began, it became clear he had a head start of several hours, if not more. Detectives questioned neighbors, friends, even Daniel's co-workers. Most were shocked, some in denial. No one could believe the man they had known for years, the man who coached Little League and handed out Halloween candy, could be capable of something like this. But as authorities dug deeper, the cracks in Daniel's picture-perfect image began to widen. He hadn't shown up for work in days. He had recently liquidated some of his assets. There were internet searches on his home computer about survival off the grid and disappearing without a trace. As police pieced together the timeline, one thing became certain. Daniel Harper didn't just vanish in a moment of panic. He had planned his escape. As investigators began to peel back the layers of Daniel Harper's life, the image of a grieving, devoted father quickly began to erode. Financial records revealed a man on the brink of collapse. Daniel's once thriving contracting business had been steadily losing clients for over a year. He had defaulted on several loans, maxed out multiple credit cards, and taken out a second mortgage on the family home. He was drowning in debt, yet he told no one. On paper, it looked like he was managing, but his financial house of cards had started to crumble long before the tragedy occurred. The deeper the detectives looked, the more troubling things they found. Daniel had been under quiet scrutiny from social services following multiple anonymous reports. School officials had expressed concern about the girl's well-being, especially Brooke, who had once confided in a guidance counselor that she was afraid of going home. No details were given, and when the counselor pressed her, Brooke shut down. Though a caseworker was assigned and visited the home, nothing appeared immediately alarming. The house was clean, the girls were polite, and Daniel was cooperative. The case was closed without further action. But there were other signs, smaller, easier to overlook. Riley had once dropped out of a group therapy session she was encouraged to attend after her mother's death. When asked why, she simply said her dad didn't want her talking to strangers. Addison had been absent from school more frequently, in the months leading up to her supposed death, often with vague explanations like illness or family matters. All of it added up to a growing sense of isolation. Daniel was pulling the girls further away from the world, and no one realized how intentional it was. The true turning point in the investigation came from Daniel's internet search history, recovered from a hard drive left in the Home Office. There were searches for painless methods of euthanasia, how to disappear, and changing identities for children. One document, never printed but saved in a hidden folder, was titled Emergency Plan. It outlined a series of steps for withdrawing cash, purchasing survival gear, disabling GPS trackers, and moving undetected through rural areas. The file also included a checklist of items that matched what was later found missing from the house. It became clear this was no impulsive act. Daniel had spent months preparing. His note wasn't a confession, it was a final justification. The line, "They're safe now," took on new meaning. Investigators began to suspect that not all three girls were actually dead. Forensics teams revisited the autopsies. Though two of the girls were positively identified through dental records as Riley and Brooke, questions began to arise about Addison. An unsettling idea began to form. What if the youngest daughter hadn't died at all? What if Daniel had staged her death as part of his escape? The possibility changed everything. The search was no longer just for a fugitive, but also for a missing child who might still be alive, and in the hands of the very man suspected of killing her sisters. With the terrifying possibility that Addison Harper was still alive, the case shifted from a triple homicide to a nationwide manhunt with a missing child at the center. The urgency grew by the hour. Law enforcement agencies across state lines were alerted. The FBI joined the investigation, and Daniel Harper was officially listed on the National Most Wanted list. His profile described him as potentially armed, highly intelligent, and extremely dangerous. But more than anything else, he was considered unpredictable. Daniel's pickup truck, a blue Ford F-150, was located 3 days after the murders. It had been abandoned on a dirt trail near the Utah border, deep within a forested area. Inside, police found camping gear, non-perishable food, and several road maps marked with highlighter. A prepaid cell phone was tucked under the driver's seat, wiped clean of all data. Even more concerning was what they didn't find. There were no fingerprints on any of the supplies, and no personal items from Addison. Still, investigators believed she had been with him. A small pink backpack, matching one seen in family photos, was discovered in the truck bed, containing crayons, a book, and a child's hoodie. Nearby, a hunter's trail camera captured a blurry image of a man and a child walking through the trees. While the figures were partially obscured, their sizes and shapes matched Daniel and Addison. It was the first solid evidence confirming what authorities feared. The girl was alive and with her father. The trail went cold for nearly a month. Then came a tip from a gas station attendant in a small town in New Mexico. The man had served a customer who looked familiar, a quiet man, heavily bearded, paying in cash, traveling with a young girl. Surveillance footage confirmed it. The man was Daniel Harper. The girl with him was never clearly seen on camera, but she appeared to be about Addison's age. The two had bought gas, snacks, and water, then disappeared again onto a back road heading north. Investigators scrambled to piece together a possible route. Daniel appeared to be avoiding main roads and sticking to rural backways. His planning had been meticulous. In nearly every location where he'd been spotted, there were no digital footprints, no phone activity, no credit card usage, no rental records. He was using cash and blending in just enough to stay ahead of the law. Profilers began analyzing Daniel's mental state. Some believed he viewed himself as a savior, convinced the world was too cruel for his daughters. Others suspected a deeper delusion, perhaps even a belief that he was protecting Addison from a fate worse than death. What exactly he was running from, or toward, remained unclear. Authorities feared time was running out. If Daniel believed he was being cornered, there was no telling what he might do next. As the search expanded into neighboring states and even across the Canadian border, one thing became increasingly evident. Daniel Harper hadn't just run. He had vanished with precision, and he had taken his daughter into a world carefully built to never be found. Months passed with no sign of Daniel Harper or his youngest daughter, Addison. Despite dozens of tips, possible sightings, and full-time agents working the case, every lead seemed to end in a dead end. The trail was cold, and hope was fading. But then, in late June, a hiker in the remote forests of northern Idaho stumbled upon something unusual, a small, weather-worn cabin deep in the woods, far from any marked trail. The hiker reported signs of recent use: an extinguished fire pit, discarded food wrappers, and makeshift bedding. Authorities were alerted, and when they arrived, they discovered evidence that sent shockwaves through the investigation. Inside, the cabin were newspaper clippings detailing the murders and the ongoing search for Daniel. There were photographs of Addison at various ages, some recent, some clearly older. One image showed her standing in front of a river, visibly older than she had been in her last school photo. There was no mistaking it. Addison had been alive, and she had been with Daniel. Investigators found no signs that the two were still in the area. Most of the supplies were gone, and it looked like they had left in a hurry. But among the belongings, a few key items painted a disturbing picture. A tattered notebook, believed to be Daniel's journal, contained short, disjointed entries. Some pages were filled with paranoid ramblings, fears about government surveillance, claims that the world was becoming poisoned, and thoughts that they would never understand what he had done. Other entries were addressed to Addison with phrases like, "You'll thank me one day, and this is how we stay free." The notebook raised difficult questions about Addison's state of mind. Was she being held against her will? Or had months on the run with her father changed her perspective? Experts warned that if Daniel had isolated her long enough, she could be suffering from trauma bonding or psychological manipulation. In essence, she might not even realize she was missing. Then came the final clue, one that pushed the case in a new direction. A trail camera, positioned on the edge of a remote path near the Canadian border, captured a haunting image. Two figures, one tall and adult, the other child-sized, walking away from the camera and into the woods. The timestamp was only a week old. Though their faces weren't visible, investigators were confident it was Daniel and Addison. The pair were wearing heavy outdoor gear, backpacks and hats pulled low. They looked prepared for a long journey. Despite renewed efforts, no further sightings followed. The dense wilderness along the border made it nearly impossible to track their movements. Some experts believe Daniel had a contact helping him, someone who supplied gear or fake documents. Others believed he had disappeared into a self-made off-grid life, using his survival skills to vanish completely. To this day, Daniel Harper remains at large, and Addison's whereabouts are unknown. The case has become one of the most unsettling child abduction mysteries in recent memory. While many hope Addison is still alive, the silence surrounding her fate grows heavier with each passing day.